How's it going, everyone? This is Cloud Chief, and in today's video I kind of wanted to go over what's kind of the easiest to obtain REMA. What is the easiest and what is the most difficult to obtain? Is that Relic? Is it Imperium? Is it Mythic weapons? Onics? Because I'm sure people are saying all kinds of different things. I know I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, Onics are the easiest to obtain. So we're going to go over this in detail and give my opinion on what's the easiest and what's the most difficult. So at this point, in general, I would say that relics are typically the easiest to obtain. It is the first ultimate weapon that has been given to us, and as such, it's just been around the longest. A lot of the content that you needed to do to upgrade your relic was pretty much soloable, even when only level 90 was the cap, when it was Abyssia days. So now being 119, it's fairly easy to just solo everything. It just kind of takes some time and just either farming dynamis or farming money other ways and just buying currency. At this point in the game, currency is relatively cheap, so it doesn't take terribly much to go ahead and make a relic. Now, kind of in general, at this point, relics are a little more looked down upon, and they are kind of weaker than their counterparts, but again, that's not always the case. Because at this point, I would say Kikoku, if you have it upgraded to R15, is probably by far the best REMA for a ninja. Typically, the other REMAs are seen as a little bit stronger as an overall view. Again, I'm not saying that they're not useful. Like, I know Apocalypse is still a very useful ultimate weapon, and I mean, all of them still are. I also know, like, at this point, that sadly Ragnarok is kind of considered the butt of jokes, although I still think it is a fairly good weapon. I think it is still considered the best Mighty Strike's Zerg method if you're not skill chaining. If you're just trying to spam weapon skills and you're being super buff, spamming resolution, and you're not trying to skill chain, I'm pretty sure it's going to do the maximum amount of damage with Mighty Strikes up. But I'd say kind of across the board, relics are the easiest to make. Next up, let's talk about Imperiums. Imperium is the next easiest to make. There's a lot of steps that gotta go into this, and some of it is long and arduous, but all in all, this is still something you can do solo. It's not completely terrible, but it is a lot of Abyssia farming, and then it's also just a lot of either farming Gil or actually farming the heavy metal plates, and then either the Rith Cinder or Rith Dross. Imperium weapons definitely take more effort and more time put into it than Relic. There's a lot of just NMs, even low level NMs you need to kill even for the early stages for Imperium weapons. Imperiums are really strong weapons. If you can keep Aftermath 3 up, they can just produce ridiculous white damage. Also, Imperium weapon skills for a lot of jobs are considered like the best weapon skills to be spamming. They typically have some more skill chain properties than a lot of other weapon skills in general. Again, there's always exceptions. Imperiums are just really strong weapons. I'm okay with the extra effort it takes. They do take more effort than relics to make, so I do think that these are kind of in the middle. However, at this point in the game, it is still very easy to obtain an Imperium completely solo. You definitely don't really need outside help to get an Imperium. Let's go ahead and move on to Mythic weapons. I'm also going to go ahead and kind of throw Ergon weapons in there, although there's kind of like an asterisk on Ergon weapons. Mythics and Ergon weapons are job specific, so if you go ahead and make one of these, you have to make one for each individual job, which is, you know, kind of sad. It's nice when you actually make a weapon and multiple jobs can use that weapon. That is not the case with Ergons and Mythic weapons. Just a little asterisk I'll just say for Ergons. It's arguably said that Ergon weapons are the easiest to make. However, you need to be legend in all the coalitions to go ahead and even start making one. And that is about a 6-month process just because of the amount of time it takes for tags to be able to rank up that far. Ergon weapons are I think the easiest to make out of anything across the board. But again, you got to put in 6 months work. So let's forget about them and now just focus on Mythics. So in terms of Mythics, I definitely think Relics and Imperiums are easier to make than Mythics. Mythics, first off, have a wide variety of requirements that need to be done before you can even get started making a Mythic. You need to have basically cleared all of Salvage and Harryar, so beaten Odin. You need to have killed all 3 of the Beastmen bosses that are in the Whitegate areas. There's a lot of running around you need to do for that. You need to have completed all of the mission stuff. You need to have climbed Nizzle Isle to floor 100. And you need to have completed all 50 assault missions. And that's just prerequisites just to even start making a Mythic. Once you have done that, you need to keep doing in Harryar, which is very time consuming, considering you can only enter the chamber once every real life hour. You need to farm a decent amount of currency that you get from Nizzle Isle, and you need to do also assaults. You need to redo all 50 assaults and make sure that you turn in the books at the end of each assault and get that cleared. And then you need 30,000 Alex, which is a fair number of Alexandrite, to actually make the Mythic weapon. And that's only going to make the base 75 weapon. You still then have the fun process of going through and upgrading it all the way up. But that's going to be the same for every other weapon except for Onics. Although you don't have to actually do that for Ergon weapons. However, as long as the laundry list is to actually make a Mythic weapon, it is still able to be done completely solo. There are some assault missions that are substantially easier if you're doing it with multiple people, but you don't even really need more than 2 or 3 to make it substantially easier. However, they are all soloable, so it is possible to make a Mythic 100% completely solo. So now let's move on to Onic weapons. It's kind of interesting how you can classify Onic weapons, because depending on your situation, it can be extremely easy to get Onic weapons, or it can be extremely difficult to get Onic weapons. To get an Onic weapon, you need to first farm 50,000 Estia beads, and there's multiple ways you can do that. One of the fastest ways is to spam out Ryzenjima tier 3s. To be able to spam out the tier 3s at a decent rate, you need to actually have a pretty strong party. So that's not something that you can do solo. I'm not saying you can't kill a tier 3 solo, but you're not going to kill it at a rate fast enough where you're going to be farming beads at a decent rate. The other decent way to go ahead and do that is to do domain invasion, and depending on what server you're on, domain invasion might be quite difficult to do, or it might be extremely easy to do. If you're on a more populated server, you can go and do domain invasion solo, and of course it's a public event, other people doing it, and you can get beads at a decent rate doing that. The other alternative is to farm Records of Eminence mobs that give you the pouches, but doing that is still pretty lengthy and takes a decent amount of time. Another option is just farming lower tier NMs, but you're going to get less beads for that, and it's still going to be a decent amount of time. My 2 recommended ways is either getting a party and spamming out Ryzenjima tier 3s, or doing domain invasion. But again, depending on what server you're on and if you have access to a decent group of people, those options might be substantially more difficult to complete. And that's just the prerequisite to get the key item. You then need to go, after you have the key item, and go to Estia Zeta, kill all the poppable NMs, then go to Estia Sky, kill all the poppable NMs, and then go to Ryzenjima and kill all the poppable NMs. While it is possible to solo all the NMs in Estia Zeta, I don't think it's possible to solo Kieran and Warder of Courage in Estia Sky, and it's definitely not possible to solo all the tier 4s in Ryzenjima. So the problem with this is, depending on the server you're on, depending on if you have access to people, this can be the most difficult REMA to obtain, or it could be the most easy to obtain. If you do have access to a decent link shell that is doing this frequently, these can be the quickest and easiest to obtain ultimate weapons out of any ones in the group. However, again, if you're on a less populated server, you don't have access to a link shell, then that can make obtaining Onics substantially harder and potentially the most difficult to obtain. Relics, Imperiums, and Mythics are all soloable, where Onics definitely are not. Just to put a little asterisk on there, I will throw in there, since we are just talking about ultimate weapons, even though these aren't exactly classified as ultimate weapons, this would be the new Dynamis weapons, although I don't know if that's properly classifying them. I could say the Superior 5 weapons, even though you can get a lower tier of it that's not Superior 5, would be Superior 4. You can just buy these off the auction house. They are a substantial amount of gil, but you also are going to need to be a master if you're going to be trying to get the Superior 5 one. So that's a decent amount of investment, as you need to master a job and then also obtain a large amount of money, in most cases 9 figures, to be able to purchase one of these weapons. They are a top-end weapon, and they will keep up with REMAs. There's also ambuscade weapons. While ambuscade weapons I would not classify as ultimate weapons, they can definitely in some situations compete, and in some cases even perform better than other REMAs. So these are definitely weapons you should look at. They are substantially easier because all it takes is spamming out ambuscade, except for the case of actually getting a pulse weapon. At this point, there are multiple ways to get pulse weapons. I have a video that talks about obtaining pulse weapons, so you can refer to that if you need to, but these are substantially easier and definitely substantially less effort than an actual REMA. So to summarize, in my personal opinion, I think relics are the easiest to obtain, followed by Imperiums, and then Mythics being the most difficult. Again, we could put an asterisk on Ergon weapons. I honestly would say Ergon weapons could be by far the easiest to obtain out of all of them, not counting the time frame that it takes to do coalitions assignments. Coalition assignments aren't difficult to do, but considering, just because of timers, it's a 6-month lockout. That's kind of annoying, whereas you can just jump in and get any of these other weapons done just by, putting your nose to the grindstone and just getting it done at your own pace. And then I have to put another asterisk next to Aonic weapons. Depending on your situation, Aonics could be the easiest to obtain weapons or completely out of reach. It's really going to come down to your situation. If you have a group of people that are, well geared and are doing top end content, then Aonics aren't that difficult to obtain. If you are on a dead server and you're solo, then Aonics are basically out of your reach and you don't really have any chance to obtain one without finding a group to be able to do it. So that is kind of the caveat to Aonic. People can make arguments about that, but again, I think that Aonics are really going to come down to your situation. So that's about it. That covers REMA weapons and essentially the amount of effort it takes to, obtain them. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for supporting the channel. And as always, may you have success in all you do.